Welcome back to the Gyrl podcast. I'm Kyra. All right, and let's welcome Allison to the show. Welcome, Allison.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't we get started by having you tell the audience listening or watching who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Allison Stieger. I have kind of an unusual job. I am a professional mythologist, and that's not usually a job that most people have heard before.
Mhm.
But what that means is from the time I was an early child, I was really, really curious and interested in why stories were as powerful as they were. It was certainly true in my life. I grew up with a reader for a mother and a storyteller for a father. And I could see that as life started throwing difficult things at me, even when I was a very young child, that stories, the presence of stories in my life was actually making it better. And I was hearing stories in church and, from the community and just everything. And I really wanted to know why that was. Like, what is it about this way that we communicate with each other as humans that is so compelling? And that brought me into myths because I thought, well, myths have been around for a really long time. They've lasted. What is it about them that makes them unique in that way? What is it about them that creates a resonance across centuries so that we can read a story that was written for a community that is millennia in the past, but it can still have meaning for us? So for me, I found a lot of help in figuring out my life and how to make my life happy and filled with purpose through an examination of these old stories. And that was what led me into this work. And I've been doing this now for, gosh, 20 years or so. And I am so delighted and astonished every day because I get to see the way myth can be transformative for our lives. I get to see the ways in which an examination of our own stories in a mythic way and through a mythic lens can actually give us answers to the things that vex us the most about our lives. So for me, it's just the most fun in the world because I get to do that. I get to not only make my own life better, which I've done, but also help other people figure out how to do the same. And
Mhm.
and for me, that's what this is all about. Like if I can help you learn how to do your life in a way that's going to be more satisfying, more happy, and more filled with purpose, then that's the best feeling in the world to me. So that's why I do what I do.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I love it because growing up with a reader and a storyteller, and as someone who, like in my day job, I work in marketing, and I always tell people, I'm like, I love the art of storytelling.
Right.
So when people talk about marketing, I'm like, yeah, it's like yeah, it is a thing, and you are trying to sell someone, but where the connection point is when you can tell an effective story that resonates with someone like one on one in a
Yeah.
personal way. So, and I love the approach of like, thinking about it as it relates to our lives and using myths. So, my first question diving on in is let's talk about you mentioned when you were just speaking about how myths can highlight themes of transformation, also self-discovery. So let's just start talking about how can we use those stories in understanding like our own personal growth in, as we kind of walk through obstacles or challenges in our daily
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that myth has kind of a specific pattern to it often, and this is not universally true, but there is a pattern of storytelling in myth that is so common that we sometimes call it the monomyth. It's also called the hero's journey, if you've heard that phrase before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea that essentially at its core, that we have to go through moments of transformation in our lives. And usually those moments are not approached willingly, at least at first. And what we have, these stories that are told over and over again. Is there was this person and they had to go do a thing and they didn't want to do the thing. And they ended up doing it anyway. And they went through all of these trials and tribulations and they came out the other side. And
Mm-hmm.
all of these benefits kind of followed along with them. So they've got these relationships, they've got this place in their community, they've got this treasure that they can now share on. And those were the stories that lasted because that's a very common thing. We do this a lot throughout our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are approached with a situation that we may not want to be involved in. Like your doctor
Mm-hmm.
says, you have cancer. And you say, well, I really don't really want that to be true. Right. Or,
Right.
or
Yeah.
your partner says they want to break up or have a divorce or whatever. Like there are moments where we die to an old version of ourselves and we are reborn into a new version. And in the process, we have to go kind of into this special secondary other world that's different than the world that we started in the world we're going to end up in. And that is what myths capture so well, is that understanding that, okay, there are moments that happen that are sprinkled throughout our lives very often and often, going on at the same time where we're coming out into a new person. So I've got two teenage sons and they're kind of in the middle of this, right? They started out as children. That child version of themselves is dying and a new adult version of themselves is being born, right? So that's
Mhm.
for many people the first time that that happens, not for everybody. Sometimes you lose a parent or you have something terrible that happens to you when you're small. But
Mhm.
even the moment of your birth is the very first one, right? You start
Mhm.
out in the womb and your life is a certain way and then everything changes and you may not feel too happy about it. I know my younger son did not. He was pretty mad about that. But yeah, so myths, they tell this story, and I think that the reason that they do is because there are things that we've learned throughout the millennia about how to do this more effectively.
Mhm.
And I think it's a very common human impulse to want to share the things that we've learned that are powerful, that were helpful. If you ever had a friend that went vegan or found an amazing new trainer or workout program and they want to tell you all about it, that's that impulse, right? Like whatever that is like, oh my God, I discovered this amazing new thing. This is what you're trying to get at in marketing, right? Like this new
Mhm.
product changed my life. This new
Mhm.
whatever changed my life. So we have this impulse to say, like, this is the cool thing that I did, or this is the thing that I did, and this was a really bad idea, and you should never do that, cautionary tale kind of thing.
Mhm.
And eventually these things kind of end up in our myths, right? We had to go on this adventure. We did this thing. We were seeking this, and all these things happen. And this is how we survived it, or this is how we made our community better as a result of this hard thing that we went through. And just that impulse of itself feels to me very much like the people that came on the planet before us, the ancestors, or whatever you want to call them, they cared enough about the people coming after them to tell these stories and to tell it in a way that's effective, right? To say, I'm going to
Mhm.
tell you a story, but I'm not going to preach at you. I'm going to put in jokes and adventures and
Yeah.
murders and romance and thrills and all, all this fun stuff. So it's a really compelling story, but it's also going to show you what to do when things are really difficult for
Mhm.
you. And to me, that's the power of what a myth has to offer. And then what you can do too is you can, and part of the work that I do with people is to say, okay, we all have the stories of our lives. You are going through something like this, or you will be soon if you aren't right now. How can we look at it as if it was a myth? Because what that accomplishes is, we have our stories and they're kind of in our bodies, right? And we'll tell our friends or family members or whatever, well, this is going on at work, or this is what's going on in my relationship, or whatever your story is at the moment. But if you actually separate from it just a little bit, if you move the story out of your body and kind of put it here in front of you, and we
Mhm.
do this by like kind of examining it as if it was a myth through different modalities. And what that does is it gives you a certain amount of distance from your own story, and it allows you to see some of the archetypes that might be at play in your story, and it gives you a way to look at it in a little bit different way, and it gives you new insights, and it allows the collective unconscious and the unconscious mind to come up with things that it wants you to know that you maybe can't get at otherwise. So for me, that's the real benefit of it, is to say, okay, we don't really think of our lives as if they are myths feel like things that happened to dead guys a long time ago that were heroic and
Mhm.
swung
Mhm.
swords and axes around or whatever. but
Mhm.
but we have the same kind of patterns that happen. So once we strip all of that extraneous stuff away from it, we can see the psychological underpinnings of it. And that
Mhm.
is what a myth has to offer, is a way through to say, okay, it can be predictive, right? Like this is what's going to happen next.
Mhm.
And I
Okay.
do this all the time. I tell people, like, this is what's going to happen next. And then they come back and like, it did happen. I'm like, I know, right? So yeah, anyway, so it's really lovely because it's we've been humaning on this planet for a long time. We share the things about it that are hard, that are effective, that
Mhm.
make our lives the best in the end, because
Mhm.
we only have such a short time here. So what can we do? We can take care of each other, we can love each other, we can look after each other, we can lean on each other for support. And myths show us the best path to doing all of those things.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I love how you said, like, if people could almost like disassociate from
Mm-hmm.
their story, like
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at it. I don't know. I saw a very visual picture of that when you were describing
Yeah.
it. Like, oh yeah, it said, oh, let me sit that here. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking and going, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you're not in it, because when you're in
Yeah.
something, it's so hard for people to be able to see like the logic or what makes the most sense to
Right.
do next, because you're just
Right.
wrapped up in it. And I know you said you work with people. So you work with people to help them sort of reshape their life narratives. One thing, what's a step that they can take, right? Because, okay, we're saying this now. You're telling me, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, yeah, Allison, that makes sense to me. Take
Uh-huh.
it, girl, put it on
Yeah.
the table. Kyra's looking in. But what do you do in scenarios when there may be people who are like, it's almost like you're helping them to rewrite something, right?
Hmm.
Giving them the power to
Yeah.
empower them to sort of look and take the journey, walk the steps,
Right.
do the thing. But what do you
Hmm.
do for people who maybe have been telling themselves, like, well, I know, I don't know, it's just not going to work out for me. Like,
Yeah.
I just can't see a way out of it, Allison.
Right.
Um, what do you do then?
Well, okay, so there are a few things that I do, and that actually is that moment right there is the topic of my book that's coming out. It's called Unstuck because there are places in this journey that we do get stuck.
Hmm.
And when you look at the heroic journey, we have this thing that I alluded to before, which is, you're called to this adventure. You
Hmm.
get that phone call with the diagnosis, or you get that we need to talk message from your partner, or
Hmm.
what, whatever. And there you have this known moment, which is the refusal of the call. So we know that that happens. You're going to resist doing this.
Hmm.
And then you continue forward and you go through all these things and you meet mentors and allies and you battle dragons and you find the treasure and you do all these things. But
Hmm.
then you're so comfortable down in the land of the dead or the other world that it can be very hard to step back into the community. It can be very hard to actually say, yes, I have learned something from that. Yes, I have something to offer back to other
Hmm.
people. Turning toward a more community aspect is an essential part of the last part of the journey. And people get stuck there too. They don't want to maybe take away their own centering in the story because
Hmm.
this is when you have to kind of come back and say, I've learned this thing and I'm going to share my story on, like all these people that came before us did that left us these myths. So
Hmm.
you resist there too. And so much of what's important about figuring this out is recognizing the places of resistance,
Hmm.
knowing the difference between when it's time to rest and when it's time to move forward. Because
Right.
sometimes we do, like you're gonna have like we're all so overworked, we're so stressed, we're so caught up in everything. We push, push, push in our lives so
Hmm.
much. And sometimes what you need to do is just stop and take a breath. And
Hmm.
so I've gotten really good at understanding whether people need a little bit of a push to kind of get forward a little bit, or whether it's
Hmm.
time to say, you know what, you need to take this beat. You need to take a moment. It's okay to
Hmm.
stay down in, like, imagine yourself kind of covered up in the blankets in bed,
Yeah.
in the dark place, right?
Yeah.
Feeling safe and comforted by the darkness around you. I mean, that is a part of what needs to happen there too. You get called to the return, but you refuse that call as well, right? So evaluating that moment is a really key
Hmm.
part of this too, right? So this is really it. And there's, we talk about like putting the story outside of yourself and moving it forward or moving
Hmm.
it in front of you so you can kind of get part of it, a different angle on it. And
Hmm.
again, that's going to give your unconscious mind an opportunity to push things up that you need to hear. There's a
Hmm.
lot that your unconscious mind knows that you can't necessarily hear. And facilitating how to get those messages out is a big part of the work that I do with people. And
Hmm.
we often do it through movement. So every time I teach a workshop or I coach someone or, we're on retreat or something like that, we introduce the ideas and the stories and everything into the mind, but then you
Hmm.
have to move it energetically through the body, right? Your body has to have a deep knowing of it as well. Just
Hmm.
knowing it in your mind is not enough. So whether that often it means yoga. I have a yoga program that I've developed that actually tracks the myths through the movement of yoga because all the yoga poses have symbology associated with them and
Hmm.
you can actually map them to the myths. So when you, for example, go into a downward facing dog pose, that is a step that takes you into the underworld because a dog is what's called a psychopomp. It actually escorts you into the land of the dead. So in the yoga pose, downward facing dog, you're actually pulling that energy of the transformation from upper world into lower world through the dog escorting you there. Okay, so that's one
Hmm.
example. But we have other poses too that can kind of
Hmm.
show us in the body what the myth is trying to tell us. So that's a part of it, but it's not always yoga. Sometimes it's like I have a retreat in Spain coming up, and it's going to be an exploration of the world of flamenco, and so we're going to be dancing flamenco and pulling the
Hmm.
energy through that way. Another Hawaii retreat coming up, and we have hula and other movement modalities of that nature. So whatever it is, the
Yeah.
movement needs to be there, right? So even if it's just getting up and dancing around in your apartment, pulling the energy through, like it's a core part of everything
Hmm.
that I do in my work and in my book is how do you move your energy through the body, what is the body knowing going to teach you? So
Mhm.
that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. I actually really, something that really resonates what you said. I think it's that resting part,
Hmm.
because I think so many people have been, especially women,
Yeah.
women have
Yeah.
been, we have been taught to just like keep pushing, push
Yeah.
forward. You can do it, like you mentioned, people being overwhelmed, overworked, stressed, but yet there's
Hmm.
still the thing where we're like, keep going, girl. You got it.
Hmm.
Keep pushing.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important because, and I say that just because I like resonate with that personally, because I
Hmm.
can recall when I remember the first time I had a coach and my therapist said this, like in the same time as I was seeing them, they were like, well, what would happen if you just did nothing? And I was
Hmm.
like, what? There's not a moment that I can't do the I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah.
But and it and it took me a lot of redos of,
Mm-hmm.
situations before I came to this place of just saying, yeah, like, what if I just took a moment
Yeah.
and just let that sit there, not try and push myself to do something. So I appreciate that that is a part of the journey of where people take a rest. And then I think you mentioned, I know you said obviously there's the resistance in the resistance of knowing the thing that starts it, right? The trigger, right?
Hmm.
But then also maybe is there a resistance to, I think you said maybe sometimes to share about what one may be going
Yeah.
through. And
Right.
obviously just there might be reasons why I might think people wouldn't
Hmm.
share certain things, but what do
Right.
you find like from the people you work with when they get to that moment of like they're working through it, right? And
Hmm.
they're getting to the other side, but why are sometimes our people resistant to share? Is it because like they feel embarrassed or like what causes that?
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of what I do is through creative work. So, and one of the methods that I use is that we try different creative modalities to try to get the ideas out. And that's been very effective even for my own personal growth. I'm a writer, I live to write. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem with living to write is that if you do anything all the time, it loses its effectiveness as a tool in your arsenal in a way, like
Mm-hmm.
so you sometimes have to do the thing that scares you the most. Sometimes that's painting or dancing or spoken word poetry or whatever. Like
Yeah.
if there's a thing that has a little bit of a charge for you in a way that scares you, that's going to be an effective path for you. So when I teach creativity workshops, this is what we do. It's like, okay, whatever, like we'll start out with the thing you're comfortable with. And
Okay.
Carl Jung makes this point in his work, right? To say that the unconscious is going to come through, but it's a very intuitive process. And sometimes you kind of have to get out of your own way to allow those messages to kind of sneak in around the
Mm-hmm.
edges.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of it too, is like people do get afraid to share. And there are a lot of complicated and nuanced things that happen in this
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I see both things. I see people that are sharing too soon, that
Okay.
haven't fully like metabolized whatever it is that they went through in a way that is going to be useful to other people. I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of memoirists and they're like, they really want to share the pain of what happened with their mom back in the day, but they haven't
Mm-hmm.
really figured out how to make that about universal, like for anyone that's
Right.
struggling with their relationship with their mom. So how do you
Mm-hmm.
know that? I mean, it's your intuition and your unconscious mind will tell you, and you have to just allow yourself to open the door to letting those messages come through. And they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the thing, is myth and ritual are really closely connected. You
Mm-hmm.
hear those two words together all the time, right? And when I talk about movement, what I'm really doing is saying ritual is the embodied aspect of myth. So if you want to understand that story, you have to pull it through the embodied path, I guess. So these are some of the things that we do. It really depends on the person. I will work with, people find their resistance in different places, but what we do is we approach that resistance with a place of curiosity. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people will go into shame, or they will go into fear, or my family's not going to like this if I speak my truth, or they're not going to like it if I have a boundary, or my partner's not
Mm-hmm.
going to like this, or whatever. There are a lot of scary things that
Right.
happen along this journey, which is why we
Mm-hmm.
call it heroic, right? And this is so this what this does is it leads me into another part of the work that I want to make sure that I talk with you about, and that is understanding the presence of archetypes in our
Mm-hmm.
lives and why they matter.
Mm-hmm.
because what I see often with women is we get really caught up in like the caregiver archetype, or
Mm-hmm.
taking care of everyone falls on women a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the caregiver or the mother or any of these kind of associated archetypes are really powerful places to be.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when we've been doing that too much and we feel completely burnt and we're ready to just, we know we need that rest,
Mm-hmm.
that can be a sign and cue from the body that it's time to give that archetypal energy to someone else for a while and let
Mm-hmm.
them learn what they need to learn through that archetype. And it's time for you to step into a different one. Because
Right.
I use this example, right? Like I usually
Mm-hmm.
make our Christmas dinner. I'm a really good cook. I love to cook.
Mm-hmm.
Now but it's also extremely stressful. I end up cooking, working really hard on
Right.
Christmas or whatever for my family. And I know perfectly well that I could turn the meal over to my 18 and 16-year-old and they could cook it. Now I've been teaching them how to cook, but what would I have
Mm-hmm.
to do in that case? I'd have to let go of a lot of control
Right.
over the
Yes.
result of the meal. They would
Right.
probably make something that would not poison us, but it will likely not be as delicious and fantastic as if I did it because I've got years of experience on them and whatever. But sometimes that's what we have to do. And this is what the ebb and flow of power feels like, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I have an archetype that I need to let go of. I've been in this one too much. I think
Right.
that if you have a 25-year-old nephew sitting on your couch every Christmas and you're pissed at him because he's not helping and just watching football all the time, it may be time for him to step into the caregiver archetype a little bit. Maybe you need
Mm-hmm.
to step back and say, you know what? This may
Right.
not be a perfect aspect, but he needs that, and I need this other space. I need the
Mm-hmm.
archetype of rest and of just sitting in my power for a minute and not being in charge of everything. And we're
Mm-hmm.
making these negotiations with each other all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really do think that understanding how we hold archetypal energy for each other and how other people see us as archetypes is
Mm-hmm.
a really useful tool to understanding it when people do things that don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because this happens a lot, right? Like if people are just
Yeah.
like, what are you doing? It's because they are reacting to an archetype.
Mm-hmm.
And, I see this with celebrities, politicians. Like, if people are either hating a celebrity or loving a celebrity, like hardcore,
Mm-hmm.
that is an archetypal response. They are holding an archetypal energy for you, and
Mm-hmm.
that has something to teach you. Now, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to hold it for other people. You're going to be on your heroic journey, but you're also going to show up in other people's heroic journeys as an ally or a villain or a temptation or a mentor or many, many other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, once we understand that, that gives us another avenue into understanding our stories, right? Like, why is it that my mother keeps me in the child archetype? I am 35 years old. I am not 8, but
Mm-hmm.
she treats me like I'm 8. That is because the child archetype in her life is filling a need for your mother psychologically. And once you start to understand that, then you can approach the thing that's frustrating you about your relationship with from a place of curiosity and empathy. And it's going to teach you a lot about who she is and who you are and how you can move through the world effectively in that relationship. So,
Thank you for going into the archetypes. I was heading there, but I think it's important because there may be people who might be listening or watching. They're like, what do you mean? Like, because you're
mm,
calling out some of them, but can you just sort of introduce people to like what the word archetype means?
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So archetypes are if you think about any kind of way there is to be a human, like any kind of role that you might fill, is something that has over time accrued a lot of energy. So when you think about, like, say, the mother archetype, that is something that everybody understands what that is and how it's different from an advocate or a hero or a
Mm-hmm.
ditch digger or an attorney or whatever. Like, any word you can think, any noun just about that describes a human
Mm-hmm.
has archetypal energy that is accrued around it based on all of these humans understanding what that is and kind of pouring into that. So if you have someone, well, okay, say for example, you went on a date with someone and they said, boy, you sure remind me of my ex. Well, you are going to be touched by some archetypal energy there, and it's going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
whatever was associated with that ex. So when they
Exactly.
start
Yeah.
doing things like yelling at you for something, and you're like, where is this coming from? It's coming from that archetypal energy that existed with the previous partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is happening around us all the time. It's very, very difficult sometimes to really know someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to just assume that they are whatever archetype that you've assigned to them. And we're
Mm-hmm.
always about like reducing the energy load on ourselves, right? So, so even like you and I, we don't know each other. We just met today, but you've got archetypal energy around you as a podcaster and a marketer and all the things that you do in the world and whatever archetype mythologist is starting to form for people, right? So by understanding this, we can say, okay, it's and I think it's different from a stereotype, it's different from a persona. We
Mhm.
make assumptions, but they
Mhm.
have all of these big energies around them. But once
Mhm.
we start to understand that and see how, someone is assigning some kind of role to us against our
Mhm.
will just by looking at us and making decisions based on just what they see,
Mhm.
then that is an archetype. So, okay, you're going to make an assumption about me. Okay, it is obvious that I am not 20 years old anymore. So, what is that going to bring with it when people look at me, right? Like
Mhm.
that's going to bring a certain amount of energy. So, do I want to show up as your wise woman? Do I want to show up as your grandmother or your mother or whatever?
Mhm.
Like that triggers things for people. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
once we start to see that, like, okay, you're treating me in a way that doesn't make sense to me. Let me understand what archetype is coming in there, or let me understand how I am doing that to someone else. And
Mhm.
even I mean, we can slip into this in our most intimate relationships. Like I struggle with this with my kids, right? They're teenagers, they're changing every day. It seems like they're not the people that they were at 8 years old.
Right.
And when I understood that my kids saw me as both myself and as the mother archetype at different
Mhm.
times, and it really does ebb and flow energetically quite
Mhm.
quickly. Sometimes they need the mother archetype because the mother archetype is a big energy. And when
Mhm.
you're trying to individuate yourself as an adult and as a person that's separate from your family, you have to push against the big energy. And they need that
Mhm.
from me. And that means that when I get frustrated or upset by something that they say, I can separate my own personal ego from that archetypal energy that I'm holding for them.
Mhm.
And that can be really useful, right? So if someone says something to you that is either trolling, like on the internet, someone's mean to you, or they praise you like unreservedly, both of those things are archetypal.
Mhm.
So if they don't know you, if they love you or they hate you, it really doesn't belong to you. It's
Right.
on the archetype that you have created around yourself. If you're stepping into any kind of public conversation like
Mhm.
what we're doing right now, right? This is going to be available to the public. So
Mhm.
people are going to come to this with their own assumptions about who we are. And that is going to be created around us. So understanding how those energies move, it's
Mhm.
really been helpful to me. Like I've been doing a lot of interviews lately and people form ideas about me that don't know me, and that's a really
Mm.
disconcerting thing, right? So
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
say either, oh, she's the worst, or she's the best, and both of those things need to not touch my personal ego.
Right.
I
Yeah.
need to not get inflated by people saying I'm awesome, because they don't know the times when I'm not awesome. Right? But it's also not fair when people say, oh, you're terrible, just shut up, or whatever they
Mhm.
say. That also can't touch me,
Mhm.
because it belongs to the archetype, and the archetype is a big energy that can take all of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can let it all live there. You can be
And
your own flawed self on the inside of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
exactly. No, I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you because I love archetypes. And of course, like in the field that I work in, we use them, like I've used them a lot to sort of help
Hmm.
establish like who a brand, who we might
Right,
appear to be as people.
right.
But I think it's also important, something you mentioned, like, I mean, you're the archetype like that someone may place you in. Like that's not just, it's not you, right? You can
Hmm.
be,
Right.
but you can have traits of it, but you
Sure.
can have traits from all of them at different times. And I
Right.
think that's what's always important. Like I think about having this conversation and talking about archetypes, and I think about something like, because it's kind of fresh, like something we did at work recently as a team, like we did like Enneagram.
Hmm.
And people forget like all nine of them are
Hmm.
inside of you. It's
Right.
just what do you flex more as
Right.
like in
Right.
your really just
Right.
natural state. Like you took
Hmm.
the quiz and you answered, or you're supposed to answer, right, with your like
Yeah.
gut instinct. So that's like this is what flexes in your most natural state. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you don't have those other things. Because I think when you start to talk to people about like any of these conversations that make people feel like they're being put into like a place, then
Hmm.
they get really nervous because they're like, that's just not like, that's not all of me. Like, and we're
Right.
like, yeah, we know that. Like, but this
Right.
might be like an indicator of like
Hmm.
how you are showing up to others in this moment.
Right. Right. And it can be a little bit. I mean, I know that there are a lot of ways that if you were to Google archetypes, or you can find decks, you can find websites that say these are your 12, or these are your 3, or these are your 7
Yeah.
archetypes, whatever. And that is a good place to start with it. But I think it is really important to remember that this is energy that shifts very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And, we can see this culturally, like some of our most famous people in our culture are capturing something archetypal that our
Mm-hmm.
culture needs, right? Like whether you love Donald Trump or hate him, he is an almost purely archetypal being, in my opinion. Like he almost has like no person on the inside of it anymore. It's just all archetype. Like he is
Mm-hmm.
meeting an archetypal psychological need for the people that love him and for the people that hate him, right? He
Mm-hmm.
is engaging our culture from this kind of out of left field way to be a politician in such a deep way because it is archetypal, right? And so whatever that was, that flashpoint in our culture that said we need a character like Donald Trump to be in the presidency, like that is an archetypal decision
Mm-hmm.
made by the culture, right? Back in the day, we used to have pantheons. We had, these gods that would say, okay, that you're in charge of travel across the sea, and you're in charge of romance, and you're in charge of young girls, and you're in charge of or power or whatever. Now we have celebrities for that, right? Like we slot people into that,
Mm-hmm.
and it can, and this is why I think it's important to understand this for everyone. Like celebrities hold a lot of it, and it can destroy them, and it has destroyed them many
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also destroy regular people, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you get too caught up in someone else's definition of who you are archetypally,
Exactly.
that can destroy you, and you have
Yeah.
to be aware of this stuff so that you know how to separate
Mm-hmm.
yourself from it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's really nice about it too is, so one thing I didn't point out, like this mythic journey that we talked about is often called the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like that it's called the hero's journey, because everybody goes through this and it makes it an identity. Yeah, a hero is an identity that's hard for some people, a lot of people, to identify, like to say, to see themselves in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you say, I'm going to go on a heroic journey, then you're
Mm-hmm.
making a choice. You're saying, okay, I am scared to do this thing, but
Right.
pulling on that heroic archetype is something that you can do. If you need the energy of an archetype, you can borrow it for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are afraid to do something, and I do this with people a lot. In fact, I do it with myself. If I'm feeling scared, I just say, you know what? I don't feel like the hero in and out of my life regular all the time. But right now, I need to go into a room and I need to just kill it at this proposal, or I need to have this difficult conversation, or I need to do the thing that takes more courage than I feel right in this moment. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna like almost like take your arms and just like, okay, now I'm pulling this thing onto, and it actually really works. Like if you, whatever you need, it was a hero, you pull that energy toward you, you go and do the thing, you borrow that big energy that comes with that word and with that archetype. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you're done and you don't need it anymore, you don't need that big heavy weight of the archetypal energy all
Mm-hmm.
around you, then you let it go with gratitude. You
Mm-hmm.
release it back, and now it's there for somebody else that needs it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can do this with any archetype, right? If you need something, a big energy to help you if you need a little bit more compassion to talk to someone, you find the right archetype that you need, or you need to advocate for someone, or you need to I mean, anything that you can imagine, any type of human interaction that you have to deal with that you feel unprepared for, by borrowing the right archetype, it will help you navigate that. It really does work. It's
Yeah.
astonishing
No.
to me that it does. Like, why would it? Like, I went like this and now I'm a hero. No, but no, but it does. Like, you just say, it's almost like I don't know, just like a little psychological trick that gives
Mm-hmm.
you that little bit of extra zhuzh of energy that you might need
Mm-hmm.
to do a hard thing that you have to do. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it also just really adds to the point that you said, like you're not the archetype because
yeah,
you borrow some of the energy from it. It's
right,
not who you are as a person. And I
right.
think that just reiterates that point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I know you talked about some of them, but as we look at it as women, right? So when you think about there are goddesses,
mm-hmm,
warriors, how can women use these archetypes to sort of inspire us, to have more confidence, to
mm-hmm.
inspire us to be more empowered in our day-to-day lives?
Well, I mean, I do recommend this to anyone. I mean, you can buy archetype decks off of Amazon or off the internet or whatever. I have my own deck coming out pretty soon, actually, and it's just cards, and they just have, they have a few different. I mean, we talked about all the nouns, right? But we can
Mm-hmm.
narrow it down a little bit and not make it so intimidating. And it'll just, say, okay, see which, you get this deck. It's got 50 or 70 or however many cards in it with, these identities.
Mm-hmm.
There is one that I like. It comes in a red box. I don't remember the name of it, but it has both the positive and the negative aspects to each one of them. So you
Mm,
may be
mhm,
in either one of that. Like
mhm,
like when you talk about like that need for rest, like, look at the cards and see maybe the hermit's speaking to you. Maybe you need to pull back a little bit and just, be in that. Or maybe if you look at the hermit and it says, okay, I've been hiding for too long, and that little bit of wisdom resonates for you, then maybe it is time to start stepping into your courage a little bit more and bringing your message out to the world. And
mhm,
again, this doesn't, you don't have to write the great American novel, or put a painting in the Louvre or anything. Like, you don't have to do that. You can have a conversation with someone at a bus stop, and you have now
mhm.
shared wisdom that is allowing them to go forward on their journey. So really, just like, you can go to my website, you can ask me personally. It's, you can sign up and talk to me for 30 minutes and I'll tell you anything you need to know about this. But so there, whatever way works for you, like, just, Google archetypes, Google, find a deck, find some tool. I will help you if you want. I'm here for that, absolutely. And start to explore
Mhm,
which ones speak to you. And what it can do too that's really powerful is it'll give you a little bit of a constellation of where you're at in the past,
mhm,
in the present. You can ask it, it serves kind of a same, but it tracks a similar energy as like a tarot deck or even astrology would, or whatever. It's pulling some of those energies into where we can see them. And by looking at what archetypes are speaking into you at any moment, it's going to tell you things that you need to know about where you are and where you're going and where you come from. So just by examining some of that, like if the queen archetype is speaking to you, maybe do some meditation on that. Maybe, I love that movement. So go on a walk and just like think about what the
mhm,
queen means for you, and allow your intuitive mind to come through and tell you what you need to know. I mean, it's going to resonate with you for a reason. So
mhm,
ask yourself what that is. And
mhm,
and I love this too. Like, ask yourself these questions right before you go to sleep, because your unconscious mind can pull things up out of you while you're asleep, and it'll come to you during the sleep, because the veil between the worlds kind of thins in that time when you're
mhm.
going to sleep and when you're waking up. So the unconscious mind can be pulled. You can pull energies from the unconscious mind up through that thin place that you find it at the end and beginning of every day.
Okay, that's cool. So, Allison, you did mention that people can reach out to you. That's a great transition for you to tell people listening or watching how they can work with you and how they can connect to you.
Well, so my website is called Mythic Stories, and if you Google either my name, Allison Stieger, or my company, Mythic Stories, you will find me very easily. I offer coaching services, retreats, classes. This deck's coming out, and the book as well. And again, I'm all over social media. I'm sharing on Substack and all over. So if you want to follow there and just hear what I have to say as time goes on, you're welcome to do that. But if you want to talk to me directly, you can sign up for 30 minutes of conversation for free. I really do love having these conversations. I've had some interesting ones over the last few months. And people are everybody's seeking something, right? Like a little bit of guidance. And this has worked for me. Like, I came out of a really difficult situation growing up. And I've made a life for myself that is happy and full of purpose. And I really want to help other people do that too. It's my number one purpose in life, is to help other people figure this out. So if you feel lost, or if you feel scared, or if you feel like you need to know what's coming next or what to do next, myths and archetypes have the answer for you. And I'm here to facilitate helping you figure out how to do that. So please reach out to me. I would love to meet you. I'm dying to meet you, actually. And what, you just go to my website, mythicstories.com. It's very easy to sign up for 30 minutes and we can chat. And again, if you want more in-depth work, we can do the coaching or whatever. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I'm absolutely eager to talk to anyone. You cannot shut me up about this stuff, as may be obvious for the last few minutes.
That's
So,
all good. No, appreciate that. And we'll make sure we drop the links in the
yeah,
show
thank you.
notes.
Thank
All
you.
right. So, Allison, we are going to go into three things with Allison. I'm going to ask
Okay.
you three questions that just helps our audience get to know you a little
Yeah.
bit better. The first one is a two-parter. This is a question I just love asking people that I interview. How do you start and end the day?
Well, I start the day with, usually I am privileged enough that most of the time, or it's a function of my age, I think, that I wake up pretty early. Usually it's still quiet, the house is quiet.
Mhm,
And I just as I just said a minute ago, see if the unconscious mind needed to tell me anything overnight. I usually just have a little bit of gratitude first thing in the morning, grateful that I woke up, that my
mhm,
husband seems to be awake. Usually there's a cat saying good morning to me. And then usually what I'll do right after that is, for me, I like to move the body a little bit. And I've learned through a lot of real resistance that getting some movement into my day every day actually makes my life a lot better. So, and then what I do before I sit down to do my work is I open the space ritualistically. I do my work and then I close it ritualistically. So that kind of compartmentalizes the time that I'm spending in this kind of sacred duty that I have to try to do this work, whatever, whether it's writing or whatever. So those are the things that I, I remember exactly how you asked me this, but I hope I'm still on track. But it really does, like, it helps me keep myself centered. It
Mhm,
helps me keep myself not kind of flying all over the place emotionally. It keeps me kind of
mhm.
calm and balanced. It makes my time the most effective. So,
Okay. I like that. Second question is, what's a goal or an intention you've set for yourself this year?
well, for me, there's a few. So I have a teenager that's graduating high school. So I am
Okay.
processing some big emotions about that right
Mhm,
now.
mhm,
And again, that's another kind of death, like changing what my relationship with a mother archetype is going to feel like when I'm not in
mhm,
active parenting anymore in a few months. So those are some big things that are happening. And then just my creative work and sharing this message that I have about myths and archetypes with the world as
mhm,
effectively as I can every single day. I want to reach as many people as want to hear this. So most of what I'm doing is to try to give myself the space that I need to sit with this mother thing that's happening,
mhm,
getting my son launched out into the world, and
mhm,
and also just being true to sharing these things. And I do get scared too, right? I need to borrow that heroic archetype sometimes. I need to remember that some of those invasive thoughts that come into the mind about how I'm not good enough or qualified enough
mhm,
or anything enough to be out and to share my voice are something that I can sit with and like acknowledge, but also not let it drive the decisions that I make in every day.
mhm,
So for me, that's an ongoing process all the time
mhm,
to just be honest about my own vulnerabilities and my own weaknesses and my own places where I have to navigate that the difference between needing to rest and needing to push forward with the work. So
mhm,
it's a very much a day-to-day thing. And I've learned so much from Myth on how to do this, but we still have to continue to kind of check in with that
mhm,
every single day. We have to constantly be doing this. It's not ever going to be easy, unfortunately, because that's not what
mhm.
human life is. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the last question is where are you currently finding inspiration?
Well, I mean, honestly, I reread the myths a lot.
Mhm,
And I read the work of other scholars, even scholars that I've studied in the past that maybe I wasn't in a place where I could hear part of the message that I needed. So
mhm,
the thing that's so fascinating about reading a myth, like there's one particular myth that I really love, the myth of Inanna. She's and the descent of Inanna. And when you read it, it feels very much like a ritual just because of the cadence of the language and the way that it moves. So the
mhm,
way that a myth kind of feels in the mouth and in the throat when it's spoken and not just read, like that pulls it into the body a little bit. So sometimes I'll just kind of pull these myths pass back through my body and see what they have to show me on a new pass. It's not like I haven't read them many times before, but just to kind of let those little cracks shine light through in a
mhm,
new way so that I have yet one more thing that I can offer and share to say, okay, this is what Anana went through, and this is what she can teach us about what we have to deal with as well. So
mhm,
just kind of constantly trying to be receptive
mhm,
to what these old myths have to bring to me and not just sort of sit on my laurels, if you will, or just like, oh, I know these myths like really well. Well, they still have things to offer and they still can teach me more about how to share them effectively. So that's something that I'm kind of constantly revisiting. Yeah.
awesome. All right. And my final
Yeah.
question, Allison, is first of all, I want to say thank you for coming today and for sharing your work with us. I really appreciated this conversation. But my last question is, what are three things you would like for the audience to take away from this conversation today?
Well, the number one thing is you are not alone. We have generation upon generation of ancestors and people that have come before that are reaching out to you from the past to show you a more effective way of managing the hard thing that you're managing right now. They know what it feels like and they left you tools to help you manage it. So I find that very comforting, right? The number one
Mhm,
thing is we're not alone. We have more people around us than we know that are there to help us.
Mhm.
And it's beyond myths too, right? It's like your favorite books or your favorite paintings or your favorite films or even your favorite video games or whatever. Like these things are ancestors showing you like how to get through things. So that is one of them. And the other one is you can borrow that archetypal energy when you need it. You know, when you're feeling afraid or when you're feeling like imposter syndrome or any one of those things, this is by just a reframing of how we think about energy, a
Mhm.
way to get an assist at any moment. So, you know, and it's really just around like there are tools out there that maybe are not spoken of commonly that will help us not only get through what we have to get through and not just survive it, but actually be transformed by it in a way that will give us the opportunity to share what we learned with somebody else down the road. So we learn we're not alone, but then also the next person that we're going to help when we're done with all of this is not alone either
Mhm.
because of what we've been through. So we get
Mhm.
that help from the ancestors from the past. We deal with our hard things in the future by the help of the heroic archetypes and other archetypes. And then we get the privilege of helping somebody else out down the road and making their path a little bit better so that they can go on and do that for somebody else. And then we just go forward into human history. So
Mm.
I would say those three things. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Allison, I want to thank you again for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, and you can always come back and see us again in the future.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Stay tuned. I'll be right back.